an interactive read aloud. We've already finished the metamorphosis unit. However, I want to kind of go back and look at how we can read these stories that we have done in a bit more in-depth way. The example I gave earlier is you should never really go into a story and go further into a story unless you know what's going on step by step. Because if you finish the story, you don't know what's happened, you haven't really accomplished anything, right? So I want us to see how we can do a process like that. So the Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka. Well, let's start there, right? Metamorphosis. We've talked about that before. What is a metamorphosis? We know it's a sort of change, right? And if you take a biology class, you know that maybe caterpillars become butterflies through a process called metamorphosis. So we know it could be something good. So is it always a good thing? Well, let's find out in the story. We'll find out. All right. One morning, when Gregor Samsa woke from troubled dreams, he found himself transformed in his bed into a horrible vermin. Whoa, so we have a change here. It doesn't seem like it's a very positive change because we have the word troubled, we have horrible, and we have this word vermin, which we may be unfamiliar with, which the book defines for us as creatures that are considered destructive, annoying, or repulsive pests. So it doesn't seem like he's had a very marvelous metamorphosis. Let's keep going. He lay on his armor-like back, and if he lifted his head a little, he could see his own brown belly, slightly domed and divided by arches into stiff sections. The bedding was hardly able to cover it and seemed ready to slide off any moment. His many legs, pitifully thin compared with the rest of him, waved about helplessly as he looked. All right, so now we have something a bit more specific, right? Vermin is not specific. We just know that it's destructive. We know that it's a nuisance. We know that it's a pest, but there are lots of different types of pests, right? Here we have a bit more of a description of, seems to be a beetle, maybe a cockroach, maybe a bed bug. It could be anything quite like that. And he doesn't seem to have control of this bias. It's not something that happens to him a lot, but maybe something that happens in other parts of the world. We don't know for sure yet in this story how often this happens. So let's keep going. What's happened to me, he thought. It wasn't a dream. His room, a proper human room, although a little too small, lay peacefully between its four familiar walls. Okay, think about that. Human room. Why would they describe it as a human room? I mean, he's had a transformation, but why? This is a very odd phrase to use, even if you're describing someone who's transformed in their room, right? So you turn the page. Okay, a collection of textile samples lay spread out on the table. Samsa was a traveling salesman, and above it there hung a picture that he had recently cut out from an illustrated magazine and housed in a nice gilded frame. It showed a lady fitted out with a fur hat and a fur boa who sat upright, raising a heavy fur muff that covered the whole of her lower arm towards the viewer. Okay, so he's a traveling salesman. We know a bit more about what sort of time period this is. We don't really have a lot of traveling salesmen today in our modern world. We buy things online, or we go to the shopping malls ourselves. People don't really come to our doors too much, so this is probably a fair amount of time back. Let's continue. Gregor then turned to look out the window at the dull weather. Drops of rain could be heard hitting the pane, which made him feel quite sad. So he feels sad. We seem to have a setting now. The weather's not particularly good. And we also have a tone, right? This whole thing seems to, we've had all these negative words, these negative connotation words like horrible, vermin, dull weather, sadness, okay? So so far seems to be kind of somber, this passage. So I wonder if this transformation will lead to something beautiful maybe. We don't know for sure, so let's see. How about if I sleep a little bit longer and forget all this nonsense, he thought. But that was something he was unable to do because he was used to sleeping on his right, and in his present state, couldn't get into that position. However hard he threw himself onto his right, he always rolled back to where he was. Okay, so we have this other idea that it doesn't seem like he likes to confront his problems. He's talking about going back to sleep already. He's just woken up, and he's not considering that this is something that he needs to really confront, right? So he's going to go back to sleep, but he can't really do it because he's having issues controlling this body of his. All right? He must have tried it 100 times, shut his eyes so that he wouldn't have to look at the floundering legs, and only stopped when he began to feel a mild, dull pain there that he had never felt before. So more evidence that he doesn't like to confront his problems, right? He must have tried it 100 times, and then he closed his eyes so he wouldn't have to see what was going on. So he doesn't like to confront things. All right, so, oh God, he thought, what a strenuous career it is that I've chosen. Traveling day in and day out. Doing business like this takes much more effort than doing your own business at home. And on top of that, there's the curse of traveling. Worries about making train connections, bad and irregular food, contact with different people, all the time so that you can never get to know anyone or become friendly with them. It can all go to hell. So he definitely sounds fed up. And it seems if you look at the way he describes his life, he doesn't seem like he has much joy in it. So why does he want to be there so badly? What is the issue for which that he's trying to get there? If he doesn't seem like he likes it, he calls it the curse of traveling. Worries about making train connections. He doesn't have good food that he can rely on, and he doesn't ever meet anyone multiple times. So he can never get a relationship. So he felt a slight itch up on his belly, pushed himself slowly up on his back towards the headboard so that he could lift his head better, found where the itch was, and saw that it was covered with lots of little white spots which he didn't know what to make of. And when he tried to feel the place with one of his legs, he drew it quickly back because as soon as he touched it, he was overcome by a cold shudder. He slid back into his former position. Getting up early all the time, he thought. It makes you stupid. You've got to get enough sleep. Other traveling salesmen live a life of luxury. For instance, whenever I go back to the guest house during the morning to copy up the contract, these gentlemen are always still sitting there eating their breakfasts. I ought to just try that with my boss. I get kicked out on the spot. But who knows? Maybe that would be the best thing for me. So he really doesn't like his work. Not only that, it doesn't seem like his coworkers like him or he doesn't like them. And it doesn't seem like he can trust his boss at all, because he said if he tried to be honest with his boss, that he would get very angry, right? So why does he still go? We still don't know, like, he hates it so much. Why does he still go there? We don't know what the situation is. If I didn't have my parents to think about, oh, here we go. So if I didn't have my parents to think about, I'd have given him my notice a long time ago. I'd have gone up to the boss and told him just what I think. Tell him everything I would. Let him know just what I feel. He'd fall right off his desk. And it's a funny sort of business to be sitting up there at your desk, talking down to your subordinates from up there, especially when you have to go right up close because the boss is hard of hearing. Well, there's still some hope. Once I've got the money together to pay off my parents' debt to him, another 5 or 6 years I suppose, that's definitely what I'll do. So there we go. We know why he has to go to work now. His parents are in debt to someone unspecified. It seems to be a considerable amount of money if he still has 5 or 6 more years to work at this place. So we finally have this reason for him having to worry about being this job that he doesn't like. And not only that, we see why we have this sort of somber passage, don't we? He doesn't seem to enjoy his life a lot. So maybe that will explain a bit of like why he is as vermin. But instead of going any further, I'm going to let you guys go ahead and continue reading yourselves. Think about these things as I have done, all right? Go through and after every sentence, ask yourself, what is the reason for this? Why do we think that the author wrote this way? Does this tell us anything about setting? Does this tell us anything about our author's motive, all right? And you can hit the end.